Hello and welcome. The purpose of this video is to help you memorize the minor pentatonic scale on the guitar. And it's going to take about an hour. The video itself is around 20 minutes, but there are exercises built in where I'm going to have you pause the video and do some practice on your own. So my conservative estimate is that this whole thing will take you about an hour. And I think you're going to find it an hour well spent, because in the end, you're going to be able to play the minor pentatonic scale all the way up and down the neck, and it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so let's transport ourselves into PowerPoint land and get to work. All right, we are here to memorize the minor pentatonic scale on the guitar together. And the reason I want to do it together is because typically you would be presented with a series of shapes or dots on a grid, and you would be told to memorize these patterns, and when you are done you will know the pentatonic scale, specifically the minor pentatonic scale for this video. And seeing all these dots and shapes out of context may leave you feeling a little bit inadequate. I mean, we all know how to memorize stuff, but when you're new to something, I feel like it's nice to have a little bit more guidance. So that's what I'm going to try to provide for you here today. There are a few prerequisites. This video might not be the best for an absolute beginner. It would be nice if you knew what a scale is, know what a key is, know the concept of how to change keys on a guitar. You don't necessarily have to be able to do it all the time really quickly, but it helps to know how you change keys on a guitar. Some knowledge of the minor pentatonic scale. Many people who are guitar beginners, at least a few months in, already know the first shape of the minor pentatonic scale. Also, we're going to be pausing the video to do some exercises, so it would be good to get paper and pencil and a guitar ready to go to get the most out of this video. What we're going to do here is we're going to memorize the entire minor pentatonic scale before this video is over. And we'll have exercises included in the video and some homework at the end to reinforce the memorization. This will give you some of the context you need to quote-unquote see the fretboard. And in a video, a later video in this series, we're going to talk about the full major scale, which is going to give you even more insight into the fretboard. What we won't do in this video is explain how to turn this memorized scale into music. That's something that you'll learn a little bit later on. And I'm also not going to attempt to explain all of music theory. Really what I want to get through is memorizing the minor pentatonic scale. As I mentioned, this is meant to be a video in a larger series. So I'm going to be putting out videos on memorizing the major pentatonic, the full major scale, and the Aeolian mode of the major scale later this year. We're in 2025 right now. All right, so this is the minor pentatonic scale. These are all those shapes that I showed you in the beginning, all laid out on the fretboard. And here they are highlighted in these individual boxes. So shapes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first thing I want you to notice is that we don't have to know all 22 or 24 or 21 frets of your guitar to memorize the minor pentatonic scale, because everything on your fretboard repeats after the 12th fret. So really we just have to contain ourselves to these 13 frets. And we'll think of these as our boundaries over here on the left and over here on the right. All you have to memorize is what's in between those boundaries. All right. Now, the other thing, kind of the hack that we're going to use to get this memorized quickly, is that you don't have to think of this as 5 separate shapes. We can think of it as 3 separate shapes. And you still get all of the dots between our boundaries here. The other two shapes are the in-between shapes. They connect these three shapes. So the first shape is the one that you probably already know. And even if you don't, it's okay to continue here. What I want you to do is pause this video and practice this shape anywhere on the fretboard. It doesn't matter what key you practice this in just yet. So you can pick your favorite spot on the neck and practice this shape. Why don't you give it 3 to 5 minutes? If you already know it pretty cold, go ahead and just do it for about a minute. If it's completely unfamiliar to you, maybe take 5 minutes. All right, go ahead and pause the video and do that on your own. Okay, welcome back. So moving on, let's look at the next shape down the line. So if we're going to break this scale into 3 separate shapes, this is going to be the second, or we'll call it the middle shape. And since this one is probably unfamiliar to you, I want you to study the pattern a little bit before you pause the video to practice. And kind of take note in your brain of how these dots are arranged relative to one another. So here on the lower strings of the guitar, you essentially have these 7 dots that are neatly arranged, 2 frets apart. You can hit these with your pointer finger and you can hit these with your ring finger, and they're nicely next to each other, separated by only 1 fret. Now when you get to the third string from the high E, one of the dots moves to the left. But then when you get to the second string, one of the dots moves to the right. And then when we get to the top 2 strings, the top string, the dots are only separated by 1 fret again. So it's almost like these are parallel lines, except right here we got 1 dot pushed out to the side, and right here we got 1 dot pushed out to the side. So that's kind of how I remember this shape as I'm moving up and down and practicing it. They're all right next to each other, except here and here I have to move out 1 fret. So go ahead and pause the video and practice this one. We'll come back in just a second. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you took 3 to 5 minutes to work that one into your head. And we can look at the one on the far right side of our pattern. Again, if this one's unfamiliar to you, take a minute to kind of analyze the shape. Essentially, we have 2 parallel lines, except in the middle 2 strings, we push these 2 notes out to the left. Another way to look at it is the notes on the lower 3 strings are a mirror image of the notes on the upper 3 strings. So you can use either one of those visualizations as you practice to try to help you along here. So again, go ahead and pause the video and work on this for 5 minutes or so and really drill it in. Okay, and we're back. All right, so this is all of the 3 shapes that you just practiced on your own. Now we want to try to put these together in your mind so it eventually will become one big shape by itself. Or if not one big shape by itself, at least you can identify the separate shapes and move from one to the other. So what I'd like you to do now is grab a sheet of paper and sketch out a fretboard. It doesn't have to look great. I know most of us are not visual artists, so your fretboard doesn't have to look great. It just has to be recognizable as a fretboard with at least 13 frets. And at this point, again, it doesn't matter what key you're in. You don't have to, put the indicators on the frets to say, oh, this is the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 12th fret, etc. Just leave it as a grid. And then I want you to actually draw in all of these notes for all 3 shapes. The first time you go through this, leave the slide in front of you and use it as a cheat sheet. But maybe after the 1st or 2nd or 3rd time drawing this out, I would like you to attempt to do it without any reference, without any cheat sheets. Also, before you get started, make note of where these 3 shapes lie relative to one another. So if you're going to take the approach of starting here and drawing all the dots for this box, boom, 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 etc., you're going to need to remember that the starting note over here is separated from this one by one empty fret. And over here, your starting note is separated from this one by two empty frets. One tip for sketching out your fretboard is if you're using an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, draw a rectangle that spans the entire width of your page. It actually doesn't matter whether you do portrait or landscape, whatever works for you. Then once you have that rectangle, imagine a center line running through the rectangle. If you want, you can sketch it out like a dashed line very lightly, but you're not going to use that as one of your strings, so just sketch it very lightly. Then above that center line, you'll draw these two lines, these two horizontal lines. This one will already be there because you drew a rectangle. Then you can go below your center line and draw in these two horizontal lines. This one will already be there because you drew a rectangle. Then you can do your best to separate that into 13 separate vertical spaces. The first time you do it, it's probably going to look a bit wonky. You're either going to end up with not enough or too much room over here on the right. But give it a try, and you'll get used to drawing it out. I really like having you draw this down on paper because it reinforces it in your memory. I think it's better than downloading a pre-printed grid, and it's certainly better than printing out a grid with the dots already on it and then having you just look at it. So really just draw the whole thing. All right, so I'm going to have you pause the video here and do that exercise for as long as you need. I would say if you want to put a limit on how much time you spend doing this, for this first time around, let's put that limit at 10 minutes. All right, so spend no more than 10 minutes drawing this out and trying to memorize, but it's your time. If you want to take 15, 20, 30 minutes, that's fine too. All right, go ahead and pause. All right, and we're back. All right, so hopefully at this point, you can play all these shapes on the guitar, and you can draw a fretboard and draw all these notes onto that grid. The next thing I want to point out is where all of the tonic notes are on these shapes. So the tonic note is the fundamental note of the scale. And again, we're not in any particular key right now, but when you lay this pattern out on your fretboard, in whichever key you decide to put it in, the tonic notes are always going to land in these spots for the minor pentatonic scale. So let's say you decide you want to play the minor pentatonic in the key of G. So you could take this blue dot here and place it on the 3rd fret on the low E string. And then all of these dots fall into place relative to that starting position if you're in the key of G. So now you have a tonic note, a G, right here, and so on down the line. And if you've already seen this elsewhere on the internet, you'll notice that there's a pattern to where these tonic notes fall. And it doesn't matter if you're doing minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, or full major scale, or any of the modes. It's kind of scale independent where these tonic notes fall. So it is actually kind of useful to memorize this pattern, even though that's not the point of this video. The reason I put the blue dots in here is because I'm going to have you find a single chord backing track in the key of G minor. And I want you to practice these shapes individually, but also moving from one shape to the other. And one thing you'll notice while you're practicing over this single chord backing track is that when you land on these blue notes or these tonic notes, everything is going to sound resolved. It's going to sound good. I mean, all of it's going to sound good because you're playing in the key. But these will sound especially at home because they're the fundamental note of the scale that you're playing. All right, so open up another YouTube window, do a quick search for single chord backing track in the key of G minor. Get your guitar out, play that backing track, and start noodling through this scale, and keep your ear open for when you hit those tonics. All right. I would recommend, just so we're all on the same page, let's do this exercise in the key of G. And you can pause the video now and practice. Okay, so hopefully you had some fun with that, and you're starting to feel the power of having memorized all of these notes in the minor pentatonic scale. And you're not memorizing the note names, I understand that, but you are memorizing the pattern, where the notes fall on the fretboard for whatever key you're in. Now let's start talking about your homework. You've done a great job memorizing the notes of the minor pentatonic scale, the pattern that is, but there's still a little bit of work to do. First of all, let's look down here. We did not bother memorizing the two shapes that overlap the other shapes. And the reason for that was because I just wanted to get you through the whole pattern as quickly as possible with as little cognitive load as possible, so you could feel great about memorizing the whole thing. And there's nothing wrong with taking that approach. That's the approach that I took. But I have spent time also learning these other two shapes because they open up possibilities for you and they connect the first three shapes that you memorized. So they are going to be incredibly useful. That is going to be part of your homework that you do on your own. These two shapes right here. All right. The other thing I want you to do is take some of the licks that you already know, some of the minor pentatonic licks that you already know, and try to find where they fall in this larger pattern of the minor pentatonic scale. So if you want to redraw the pattern, or if you already have the pattern drawn out from your previous exercises, maybe take a highlighter or a pencil and note the areas where your favorite licks fall. For example, right here is the House of Blues. It's a classic spot where people go to get fun sounding licks. If that's a spot that you go to often, take your highlighter and highlight that. If you like to hang out inside the first shape, maybe in this little area here, go ahead and highlight that. But also take note of some of the other opportunities here. I've highlighted these areas as well because I think they're good spots to play around in. I call them constellations. Some people I've heard call them sandboxes. They're just areas inside the larger pattern that you go to for tasty licks. Notice that the three that I've highlighted here happen to intersect or overlap the three shapes that you memorized, and that's really useful to have licks and runs that overlap the various shapes so that you're not just stuck inside the boxes. I mean, you've memorized the overall pattern from end to end, but it is still easy to get trapped inside the individual boxes. So make sure that you're doing things that get you to run across the entire pattern, not just staying inside one box and then, oh, now let's move to the next box, and now let's move to the next box. Try to integrate everything together. All right, so then the last bit of your homework is to check out the other videos in this series. As of the moment that I'm speaking these words, they have not been created yet, but I'm hoping to get them posted early here in the year 2025. The next one is going to be memorizing the major pentatonic scale, which is going to be kind of easy because, spoiler alert, it's the same pattern as the minor pentatonic. We just move the tonics. We move those blue highlighted notes, and you'll have to do a little bit of shifting to make sure you're staying in the right key. All right, and I will now leave you with final words of encouragement. You have got this. This is our final product, the minor pentatonic scale with tonic notes highlighted. Have fun playing and practicing, and we'll see you in the next video.